The call came the moment the elevator doors opened to the penthouse. An unknown number. Harsh vibration against Catherine Vale's palm, the city glittering like a spilled necklace below her windows. She should have let it go to voicemail. Billionaires do not answer stray calls at midnight. But something in the rhythm of the ring cut through habit. "Miss Vale?" a hoarse male voice asked, wind hissing behind him. "Don't hang up, your daughter." Catherine's spine turned to wire. "Who is this?" she said evenly. "Already walking, already running." "Name's Jack," the voice rasped. "I'm nobody, but I'm looking at danger for her." Catherine's heels clicked across white marble, echoing like small alarms. Security monitors along the corridor bloomed in cold blue squares, the live feed from street cameras near the conservatory where her daughter had gone to a birthday dinner. "Where?" Catherine demanded, cutting past politeness, past sorrow. "Corner of Cambria and 8th, Jack said, breath fogging into the phone as a bus roared past him. Van's been looping the block twice, plates taped, lights off. 2 guys got out. They're waiting for a girl that looks just like your kid. Pink coat, white backpack. I tried to wave her off. She didn't see." Catherine kept walking until she reached the glass wall that turned the night into a mirror and the city into a map of decisions. 16 floors below, traffic braided and unbraided impatient streams. On the monitor, a pale blur, her daughter, Ivy, stepped from the restaurant vestibule into the cold, breath clouding, phone up, innocence radiant and loud. Catherine's throat tightened. "If this is a shakedown—" "Lady," Jack said, gentler than his rasp, "I got nothing to shake. I'm calling from a shelter's donated phone with 8% left. I'm not asking you for money. I'm telling you where to look." She toggled fees with practiced hands, pulling street angles until the van appeared too clean, too still, too interested in being boring. "Stay on the line," Catherine said, already signaling her chief of security with a silent alert that turned his watch red. "If you can, keep eyes." Jack's laugh was short. "All I got are eyes." He shifted, cardboard crackling underfoot, the city's winter breath gnawing his coat. "I've seen this before. Guys like that wait until she's between lights. They move like they're just asking for directions. Then she's gone. 10 seconds, 15 if she fights." Her security team erupted from the far end of the corridor like blood cells racing to a cut. "Cambria and 8th, Catherine said, already moving toward the private stair to the helipad. Van, dark, taped plates, 2 on foot. The chief nodded once and spoke into his mic in that measured tone men teach to dogs in emergencies. Catherine pressed the phone tight. "How far are you from her?" "Half a block," Jack said. "Behind the bus shelter. I told the night clerk at the bodega to call 911. But your people will beat them." "They will," Catherine said. "Don't be a hero." "I'm not," Jack answered. And it landed like a truth. "I'm just tired of watching bad things happen." On the screen, Ivy stepped into the crosswalk. That careless little bounce still left over from childhood. One of the men peeled off the van, empty hands held open like harmlessness. Jack's breath quickened in Catherine's ear. "He's talking to her," he narrated, as if the play-by-play could slow time. "He's pointing behind her classic distract. She's smiling, don't smile, kid nope. She's stopping." "Ivy, move," Catherine whispered to the glass, as if love could become wind at that distance. Catherine's helicopter lifted off, the rotors peeling the night back in layers. The pilot spoke coordinates, but she only heard numbers the way a mother hears a fever. Imprecise, urgent, useless, without touch. "Jack," she said, steadying her voice. "What do you see?" "Second guy is circling," he said. "He's behind her now, The phone filled with a blur of running feet, fabric swish, a small grunt. "Hey!" Jack barked. Voice turned from smoke to steel. Catherine stopped breathing. The camera showed motion smeared by speed, her daughter startled, stepping back, the man's hand a hook in the dark. Jack didn't sound like a homeless man then. He sounded like someone who had once been paid to keep strangers alive. "Hands off," he snapped. "Back up." A thud, a curse, the skid of shoe rubber on salt-sanded concrete. "Kid, go to the store now." But Ivy, hale and stubborn, turned toward the wrong danger, curiosity. "I'm okay," she said, too loud, trying to make it true. Jack's breath came in frostbitten threads. "No, you're not," he told her, gentler. "Inside, 2 doors. Tell them Jack sent you." "Who's Jack?" she asked, because 16-year-olds believe names will make monsters polite. The van flinched, brake lights blooming red. Doors cracked open like teeth. Catherine's chief spoke in her ear now, voice clipped. 2 minutes out. Local units closer. "Not fast enough," she said, not accusing, simply counting. In her phone, Jack's world jolted, his feet in the air and then back on the ground, the sound of a body absorbing a decision. "You want me," he told the men, breathless but not afraid. Not her. It was a ridiculous sentence. Of course they wanted the asset, but he said it with such naked certainty that even greed paused to consider mercy. "Lady, you still there?" Jack asked, as if she might have gone to brush her teeth. "I'm here," Catherine said, and the ice melted off the syllables. "I'm watching. Tell her to run." "I can't reach her phone," Catherine said, grief a burr in the throat of logic. "Then you'll hear me try," Jack said. The line lurched again, then steadied. "Kid," he called, softer. "I know you don't know me, and I look like trouble, but my trouble's for them, not you. Inside, now." A beat. The sound of a doorbell jangled the bodega, swallowing a child whole. The man lost patience the way wolves lose leashes. One swung first, sharp, bored, practiced at ending conversations. Jack didn't block. He simply wasn't where the fist expected, and the man's knuckles met cold air and old night. "I got nothing you want," Jack said mildly, even as his ribcage screamed history. "Wrong," the second man replied, and Catherine could almost see the smile. "You got our timing." Tires squealed at the end of the block, local patrol turning in, lights off, a quiet kind of cavalry. Catherine pressed her brow to the glass. "Hold them," she whispered to a stranger. Jack laughed, which surprised everyone, including himself. "Buddy, you're not the first person to think time belongs to him." The first punch that landed made a sound like a book closing. Catherine flinched, despite herself, the helicopter tilting a fraction as the pilot swung toward the park. "We have eyes," the chief reported. 1 minute. "That's 59 seconds too long," Catherine said. But there was no anger. There was only a clock straining its leash. In her ear, the grunt of effort, the suck of winter air. Jack's voice counting under his breath, the way men count pull-ups and prayers. Inside the bodega, Ivy pressed against a shelf of cold sodas, cheeks white, hands shaking around a phone that couldn't get a signal through too much glass, and fear. The clerk, an old man who had seen 4 different neighborhoods grow and die in the same space, put a hand on her shoulder and said, "Stay here," and locked the door. As if glass were a shield, and not a story about vulnerability told to itself to sleep. Ivy peered through the window at the shaggy man who had appeared from nowhere and decided she was his problem. It didn't make sense. It meant everything. Sirens finally sang a block away. The van stuttered forward, then rocked back, undecided. Jack heard the calculus change in the men's breathing. "Not tonight," he said quietly, as if turning off a lamp. He stepped back, palms up, not in surrender, but an invitation. Leave. For a second, they almost did. Then one lunged, low and mean. Jack pivoted just enough. The man skidded on the salt, shoulder first into the iron corner of the shelter bench, breath leaving him like a bad idea. The second snarled, yanked the van door, and chose a future with fewer witnesses. 2 patrol cars glided in, blue lights cold as certainty, officers fanning with that careful movement designed to contain and not worsen. The van tried to rabid, but a third unit angled its nose with quiet authority, and choices evaporated. Catherine's chief arrived at a sprint, suit jacket open, voice crisp. In the helicopter, Catherine finally breathed. On the feed, she watched her daughter fly into the aisle and bang on the glass. The clerk unlocked the door. Ivy ran the short distance between fear and relief, and into the orbit of the man her mother had never met. Jack swayed once, and then found the bench with a hand that remembered how to be useful. The chief reached him first. "Name? Jack?" he said, because that was still true. "Medical?" the chief asked. "Later," Jack answered, which was not what his ribs advised. He lifted his head when Ivy stopped short in front of him, as if a bird had landed on his shoe without quite trusting gravity. "You okay?" he asked. Ivy nodded, then nodded again, too much nodding. The body's way of confirming the soul hadn't left. "Thank you," she said, and meant it like a vow. Catherine touched down on the hotel roof, across from the block, faster than the street would allow, and took the stairs like a woman who had paid for the building and for the right to ignore the elevator's opinions. She crossed the last strip of pavement between her and Ivy without seeing anything else, and folded her daughter into the kind of hug that puts days back on calendars. Ivy cried only then. When she lifted her head, she gestured toward the man on the bench. "He called you," she said. "He made me go inside." Catherine turned and finally saw him. The beard made him older. The dirt made him smaller. The posture made him braver than his clothes suggested. Up close, Catherine noticed things the camera never tells. How carefully he set a bleeding knuckle against his coat to keep from leaving stains on civic property. How he looked at the officers without challenge and without apology. How he let the chief talk to him like a colleague, not a problem. "Jack," she said, testing the name he'd given her first. "I'm Catherine Vale." His mouth tugged. "Yeah," he said, not unkind. "I figured." There were forms, of course, and questions, and the shabby theater of competence public danger demands. The men were cuffed. The van's plates were peeled. The clerk gave a statement that began with, "I told him not to get involved," and ended with, "Thank God he did." Catherine stood with her daughter under a street lamp that painted them in moral geometry. She kept one hand on Ivy's shoulder and used the other to offer Jack a folded square of linen from her coat pocket. "For your hand," she said. He took it like it was proof he still had a place in the world. When the last car left and the block shook itself like a dog after rain, Catherine turned back to Jack. "You saved my daughter," she said, deliberately placing the words where gratitude could build a foundation. He shook his head once. "She saved herself," he answered softly. I just yelled loud. He stood, wobbling, dignity refusing to limp. I'll go, Ivy blurted. Please don't. Catherine surprised herself by echoing the plea with her eyes, if not her mouth. The night was not done arranging them. Somewhere inside her ribcage, a door she didn't know was locked began to open. The precinct conference room smelled of burnt coffee and paperwork. Catherine Vale sat straight backed at the long table, her daughter safe beside her, flanked by security. Across from them, Jack slouched, coat torn, hair dripping rain onto the tiles. An officer clicked his pen, waiting. Catherine folded her arms. Why should I believe a man who sleeps under bridges? Jack's jaw worked. Because I was there. Because I saw their eyes before your guards ever noticed. I don't need a paycheck to tell the truth. Ivy's small fingers tightened around her mother's sleeve, silently begging her to listen. Security footage replayed on a wall monitor. The dark van, the men stepping out, Ivy hesitating, Jack stepping in. Catherine's eyes narrowed at the grainy heroics. You put your hands on my daughter, she accused. Jack's gaze flicked to Ivy, then back, to keep her from being taken, not for any other reason. The officer leaned forward. Ma'am, your kid would be gone if this guy hadn't interfered. Catherine's lips pressed thin. Praise for a vagrant tasted sour. Yet the truth glared at her from the screen, her daughter still breathing because of him. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Outside the precinct, rain drummed on the awning. Catherine's SUV waited, polished and black. Jack lingered under the flickering streetlight, shoving his hands into his pockets. The chief of security murmured, Want me to chase him off? Catherine shook her head absently. Ivy leaned against her, whispering, He saved me, Mom. Catherine exhaled. Yes, but men like him usually want something in return. Jack lit a cigarette stub, shielding the flame from the drizzle. He didn't glance their way. He looked like a man who had walked away from too many goodbyes already. Ivy's eyes stayed on him until the SUV door shut. The next day, Catherine's office tower glittered above the city, a fortress of glass and ambition. She tried burying herself in contracts, but her phone buzzed with unknown numbers. A voicemail rasped. Tell your daughter not to walk alone. Last night was just rehearsal. Catherine's stomach lurched. She called security, barking orders. Double detail, new routes, no solo outings. Yet unease gnawed at her. Whoever had spoken knew details. They had been close. And the only one who had seen them up close, closer than any guard, was the man she had dismissed. Jack's voice echoed, uninvited in her memory. 10 seconds. That's all it takes. That evening, Ivy tried to laugh at dinner, but the edges of her smile trembled. Catherine excused herself and stepped onto the balcony, the city a sprawl of jeweled veins. She dialed her chief. Any word? We tightened the perimeter, he said. No suspicious movement. But Catherine's instincts, sharpened by years of boardroom betrayals, told her silence wasn't safety. A shuffle of footsteps below caught her attention. She peered down and froze. There, by the service alley, leaning against the dumpster with a cigarette glow, was Jack, watching, waiting, like a dog outside a gate, uninvited. And yet, Catherine didn't call security. The following morning, Catherine ordered coffee from her private barista, but the cup sat untouched. She called for Ivy's driver and then, impulsively, went to the lobby herself. She spotted Jack outside, drenched in early fog, pacing near the revolving doors. Her first instinct was annoyance. But when Ivy skipped out of the elevator in her pink coat, Jack's eyes sharpened instantly, scanning corners, mirrors, shadows. He didn't look at Catherine. He looked at threats she didn't see. "You again," she said coolly, stepping out. Jack met her gaze briefly. "You can hate me. Just don't ignore what's hunting you." Catherine bristled. "Hunting? That's a dramatic word." Jack leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Not when you've watched it happen. Same van circled last night. South side, near the garage. I tailed them until my legs gave out." Catherine frowned, suspicion tightening. "Why would you care?" Jack looked past her to Ivy, who clutched her backpack straps nervously. "Because no one else saw. And because kids don't deserve to pay for their parents' enemies." The words hit Catherine like a dart. For all her wealth, she knew truth when she heard it. Her breath fogged the air between them. She didn't dismiss him this time. Later that day, Catherine's board meeting dragged with graphs and projections. But her phone buzzed again. A text from a private number. Garage. 2 men. White van. She stiffened, excusing herself. The underground levels smelled of fuel and echo. Ivy's driver stood tense, eyes darting. Jack emerged from the shadows. "Stay behind me," he hissed. Catherine opened her mouth to snap back, then froze. At the far end of the row, a white van idled, its headlights off. 2 silhouettes shifted inside. Catherine's pulse leapt. Jack's hand curled into a fist. "Told you," he muttered. For once, she had no rebuttal. The van door cracked, a figure stepping out. Catherine's security detail rounded the corner too late. Jack moved first, not with grace but with desperate precision, positioning himself between the stranger and Ivy. "Back in the car!" he barked. His tone startled Ivy into obeying. The man froze as Catherine's guards finally drew weapons, voices booming. The van screeched into reverse, tires squealing. Within seconds, it vanished into city veins. Catherine's chest heaved, fury and fear mixing. She turned on Jack. "How did you know?" Jack's face was shadowed, eyes weary. "Because I live where people plan ugly things, and I listen." Back in the penthouse, Catherine paced, heels tapping like war drums. Ivy sat curled on the couch, pale but safe. Jack stood awkwardly near the door, unwilling to sit on furniture that looked worth more than his life. Catherine stopped and faced him. "Why you? Why are you the only one who sees them?" Jack exhaled, running a hand through his filthy hair. "Because I used to be one of them." Catherine stiffened. "What?" Jack nodded slowly. "Military. Then private security. I spent years protecting names like yours, until I lost someone I was paid to guard. Lost everything after." His voice cracked. Catherine's arms folded tighter. "And now you expect me to believe you've turned guardian angel?" Jack's laugh was brittle. "Lady, I don't even believe it. But I can't stand by again. Not if I can help it," Ivy whispered from the couch. "Mom, he means it." Catherine turned sharply. Her daughter's eyes were wet, honest. Catherine sighed, the weight of decisions heavy. She gestured to a chair. "Sit, for tonight." Jack hesitated, then lowered himself carefully, as if afraid to stain the white leather. Catherine sat opposite, watching him like a hawk. The uneasy alliance had begun. Hours crawled. Jack dozed lightly, head bowed, every creak of the building snapping his eyes open. Catherine couldn't sleep either. She studied him in the half-light, the grime, the scars, the tension. He looked nothing like the polished men at her galas. Yet he had thrown himself between Ivy and danger twice, without hesitation, without expectation. Catherine's chest ached with conflict. Was she foolish to let him near, or foolish to doubt him? As dawn smeared gray across the skyline, she realized something unsettling. She wanted him there, because with him, the silence felt less fragile. By morning, headlines buzzed. Heiress nearly abducted outside garage. Catherine's PR team scrambled, but the details leaked mysterious rescuer, whispers of a homeless man intervening. Paparazzi camped outside. Catherine's phone rang endlessly. She ignored them all. Ivy leaned at the window, gazing down. "They're writing about him," she said softly. Catherine joined her. Indeed, Jack sat on the curb, sipping from a paper cup a guard must have brought him. Cameras flashed like lightning around him. Catherine clenched her fists. Jack looked small, dirty, out of place. Yet, somehow, he looked truer than any headline. That evening, Catherine called Jack back inside. "You've made things complicated," she snapped. Jack raised an eyebrow. "I didn't call the press." "No," she admitted reluctantly. "But you've become part of this story, and stories get twisted." Jack shrugged. "Twisted however you want. I'm used to being the villain," Ivy piped up. "He's not a villain." Catherine shot her daughter a look, but said nothing. Silence thickened. Finally, Catherine exhaled. "I need to know if this ends with you walking away, or with more blood on my doorstep." Jack's voice was quiet. "That depends on how far they're willing to go." 2 nights later, Catherine hosted an emergency gala disguised as a fundraiser. Her world demanded appearances. She wore diamonds. Ivy stayed home under guard. Jack lingered in the alley nearby, refusing to leave her unshielded. As limousines lined up, Catherine moved through chandeliers and champagne. Smile practiced. But her earpiece crackled. Suspicious movement outside. Her heart dropped. She slipped to the balcony. Below, she spotted the white van again, engine idling like a patient predator. Jack was already there, shouting at guards, pointing, moving fast. Catherine's breath hitched. Once again, the ragged man saw danger first. Police arrived, sirens slicing through the gala music. Guests murmured. Scandal already tasting sweet. The van roared away before capture, but the message was clear. The threat wasn't finished. Catherine returned inside, face pale. Her board members whispered. Investors frowned. But in her mind, one truth repeated. Jack had been right. Again. Later, in her car, she found him waiting by the curb. "They'll keep coming," he said. Catherine swallowed. "And you'll keep following me?" Jack nodded. "As long as your daughter's breathing." For the first time, Catherine didn't argue. She just whispered, "Then don't disappear." The days that followed blurred with tension. Catherine's security tightened protocols, but Jack's instincts proved sharper. He noticed a car parked too long, a stranger loitering, a reflection in glass no one else caught. Each time, his warning came seconds before her guards reacted. Catherine began watching his face instead of their radios. Ivy, meanwhile, grew attached, trailing him with questions. "Were you really a soldier?" she asked one night. Jack nodded. "Long time ago." "Do you miss it?" Ivy asked. He hesitated. "I miss knowing who I was." Catherine overheard, her throat tightening at the quiet admission. One evening, Catherine found Jack outside, staring at the city lights. She approached cautiously. "Why are you really doing this?" Jack's answer came slow. "Because when you lose everything, you'll learn what matters." And keeping that girl safe feels like something worth being again. Catherine studied him, the ragged outline of a man who had fallen farther than she could imagine. In her world, failure meant lost profits. In his, it had meant losing himself. For the first time, she saw him not as a nuisance, but as an anchor in a storm. That realization frightened her more than the threats. Weeks passed. The attacks didn't stop. They evolved. Anonymous calls, cut wires, a poisoned rumor about Ivy's school. Jack spotted each ripple before it grew waves. Catherine began to rely on him openly, no longer pretending otherwise. Her staff bristled, some questioning her judgment. "He's unstable," one guard muttered. Catherine silenced him with a look. "Unstable doesn't save your life twice," she said coldly. Privately, she wondered how many more times he could. Jack seemed to wear down, sleep thinner, ribs sharper, yet he never stopped watching, always between Ivy and the dark, always ready to stand when no one else did. One night, after Ivy finally slept, Catherine poured a glass of wine and handed Jack water. They sat in silence, city lights painting the windows. "You should hate me," Jack said suddenly. "People like you built ladders out of people like me." Catherine flinched. "Maybe, but you've been holding mine up." Their eyes met, raw, unarmored. For the first time, Catherine whispered what pride had hidden. "Thank you." Jack looked away, emotion catching in his throat. The war between them had shifted. Neither knew what the end would bring, but both felt it something bigger than fear bound them now. The storm came not from the sky, but from Catherine's phone, an encrypted message with a single photo. Ivy walking to school, circled in red. Catherine's blood iced. She locked her office door, voice trembling when she called security. Jack stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes narrowing at the image. "They're done playing," he muttered. Catherine pressed her hand to her temple. "How do they know her schedule? Her roots?" Jack met her gaze. "Because someone inside is feeding them." Silence hung heavy. Catherine realized trust inside her empire was crumbling, and the only one she still trusted stood outside it. That night, Catherine gathered her staff in the penthouse, demanding answers. Guards swore loyalty. Assistants feigned ignorance. But Jack lingered in the back, studying faces like maps. He pointed suddenly. "Him." A junior guard flinched. Catherine snapped. "Explain." The guard stammered, sweat blooming. Jack stepped closer, voice low. "You glance right every time her daughter's mentioned. That's not nerves. That's checking your comms." Within seconds, 2 loyal men pinned the traitor. His phone revealed a string of messages to an unknown number, each one with Ivy's location. Catherine's stomach twisted. Betrayal hadn't come from the streets, it had lived in her walls. The traitor spoke quickly, once cornered. "They want leverage, not money. Just her, the daughter." Catherine's nails bit her palms. "Why?" "Because hurting her hurts you," he whispered. Catherine dismissed the others and turned to Jack. "What do I do?" The question startled her. Billionaires didn't ask vagrants for counsel. Jack rubbed his beard. "You take her somewhere they can't follow, somewhere no one with a badge or bank account would think to look." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "And where is that?" Jack half smiled. "Where I live, where no one looks twice at shadows." For once, her wealth was useless. His world would save them. The following dawn, Catherine and Ivy slipped into clothes without logos, hair tucked under caps. Jack led them through alleys that reeked of damp cardboard and forgotten humanity. They entered a crumbling church where pews had been traded for sleeping bags. Dozens of homeless eyes turned toward them, wary but curious. Catherine stiffened, unused to being prey instead of predator. Ivy clung to Jack's coat, strangely unafraid. Jack raised a hand. "They're with me." Murmurs rippled. A gray-haired woman smiled toothlessly and handed Ivy a piece of bread. Catherine's throat tightened. For the first time, she saw safety not in marble but in kindness. Hours blurred into days. Catherine learned the rhythms of Jack's world. Soup lines where stories mattered more than names, corners where trust was currency. She watched Ivy laugh with children who carried dolls made of rags, her guardedness dissolving. Jack stayed near, always scanning. One evening, Catherine approached him by the fire barrel. "How do you live like this?" she asked. Jack shrugged. "One day at a time, one eye open, and hope someone notices when you disappear." Catherine swallowed hard. "Is that what happened to you?" Jack's gaze dropped. "Yeah, except no one noticed, until now." His eyes flicked to Ivy, but peace couldn't last. Jack spotted them first, two men in clean coats, loitering at the edge of the camp, pretending to smoke. He tensed. "They found us." Catherine's heart hammered. "What now?" Jack grabbed her arm. "We move. Now." The camp scattered like startled birds. Jack led Catherine and Ivy through labyrinthine alleys, his pace sharp. Behind them, footsteps grew louder. Catherine tried not to panic. "Where are we going?" "Old subway tunnels," Jack said, breath ragged. "Dead line since the 70s. Perfect for losing people." Ivy stumbled, but Jack scooped her up with surprising strength, muttering, "Hold on, kid. Almost there." They reached a rusted gate, Jack wrenching it open with a groan of metal. The tunnel swallowed them in darkness, only the echo of water dripping. Catherine clutched Ivy, her diamond bracelet glinting faintly. Jack hissed, "Lose it." She tore it off, tossing it aside. The footsteps behind grew nearer, shouts bouncing off stone. Jack pressed them against the wall, signaling silence. The pursuers passed, their flashlights sweeping the opposite side. Jack's breath was steady, even as sweat streaked his temple. Catherine realized he wasn't just surviving, he was leading. He had been trained for this. He had once been like them. When they finally emerged blocks away, dawn cracked gray. Catherine collapsed onto the curb, lungs burning. Ivy leaned against her. Jack scanned the horizon. "They'll regroup," he said grimly. Catherine stared at him. "Why are you doing this? You could have walked away." Jack's jaw clenched. "Because I walked away once before. A family I was hired to protect. I hesitated. They didn't make it. I see her," he nodded at Ivy, "and I can't let history repeat." Catherine's throat closed. She had assumed his brokenness was laziness, but it was guilt, a debt he had carried through every freezing night. That evening, Catherine received another message, a video of her company's boardroom, men discussing her removal. The abductions were more than revenge. They were leverage for hostile takeover. Catherine's fists shook. "They're using my daughter to destroy everything." Jack's eyes hardened. "Then we fight on your ground and mine." Catherine blinked. "Meaning?" Jack smiled grimly. "We lure them out. We let them think they've won. And then we close the door." For the first time, Catherine wasn't the strategist. She was the student. And her teacher was a man the world had discarded. The plan was dangerous, Catherine hated it. But she trusted Jack now more than her own advisors. A staged outing for Ivy, a decoy walk in the park. Catherine visible at her side. Hidden cameras everywhere. Police waiting, though Catherine barely believed in their competence anymore. Jack disguised himself in the crowd, Scruff concealed under a hood. Ivy trembled, but Jack squeezed her hand once before blending away. "I'll be close," he whispered. Catherine's pulse thundered. The bait was set. The question was whether predators would bite or devour. They came fast, 2 SUVs screeching to a halt, men in suits pouring out. Catherine's scream was rehearsed but became real as Ivy was yanked toward the car. Before guards reacted, Jack was already there, dragging Ivy free, swinging with feral precision. One attacker fell, teeth scattering. Another raised a gun. Jack lunged, tackling him into the fountain, water exploding. Police swarmed at last, sirens deafening. Chaos spiraled, but Catherine clutched Ivy tight, never letting go. When the smoke cleared, 3 men lay cuffed. Jack stood soaked, chest heaving, knuckles split. He had bled for them again. Catherine couldn't look away. Back at the precinct, Catherine gave her statement. Ivy clung to Jack, refusing to leave his side. Catherine watched in silence as officers tended his wounds. The irony stung. Her daughter trusted a homeless man more than anyone with a badge. When asked for his address, Jack chuckled. "Bench on 5th, under the mural." The officer raised an eyebrow but wrote it down. Catherine's lips parted, then closed. For a woman who owned towers, she had no words. She simply whispered to Ivy, "He stays with us tonight." Jack shook his head. "Not my world." But Ivy begged, and Catherine didn't argue. That night, Jack sat awkwardly in Catherine's penthouse, the skyline stretching endless. Ivy fell asleep curled on the sofa beside him, trusting him completely. Catherine poured 2 glasses of water, handing him one. Their eyes met. "You saved her life," she said. Jack's reply was soft. "She saved mine first. She made me remember I could still protect someone." Silence wrapped him. Catherine studied his face, broken, tired, real. For years, she had lived among polished liars. And here was a man with nothing, who had given everything. Against her instincts, she smiled. "Then don't disappear again." Weeks later, the conspirators were exposed, thanks to confessions and evidence seized. Catherine retained control of her company, stronger than before. But at night, when the cameras were gone, she still found Jack on her balcony, scanning the city. "You don't have to," she told him. Jack shrugged. Habit. Ivy often joined him, listening to his stories of old battles, asking endless questions. Catherine would watch them from the doorway, her heart torn between disbelief and gratitude. Slowly, she realized he wasn't just protecting her daughter. He was becoming family. Catherine offered him a formal job, head of private security. Jack balked. "I don't belong in suits." Catherine shook her head. "You belong where my daughter feels safe." Ivy chimed in, grinning. "And that's with us." Jack rubbed his temple. "You're both impossible." But deep inside, he felt something bloom he hadn't dared. Belonging. Catherine's staff eyed him warily, but Catherine silenced complaints with one sentence. "He's the reason Ivy is alive." End of discussion. Power silenced envy. Respect replaced suspicion. Months passed. Jack shaved, hair trimmed, posture straighter. He still carried the weight of alleys, but he walked taller now. Catherine noticed the change and hid her smile. One evening, After Ivy's piano recital, she turned to him. "You've changed." Jack shook his head. "I've remembered." Catherine tilted her glass. "Remembered what?" He met her gaze. "That I'm still a man, not just a shadow." Catherine's chest ached with something she couldn't name. Perhaps admiration, perhaps something deeper. But she only said, "Good." Spring arrived, bringing new storms of business. Catherine traveled often, Ivy in tow. Jack accompanied them, silent, vigilant. Once, during a press conference, a journalist sneered, "Why is a homeless man guarding your heiress?" Catherine's answer was calm, unflinching. "Because he's braver than any billionaire I know." Cameras flashed, headlines erupted, but Catherine didn't care. Truth mattered more. Later, Jack grumbled, "You didn't have to say that." Catherine smiled softly. "Yes, I did." On Ivy's birthday, Jack surprised her with a carved wooden pendant. A small sun, rough but radiant. "Made it from scraps," he said, embarrassed. Ivy hugged him fiercely. Catherine's throat tightened. Money bought pearls and diamonds, but Ivy treasured this more. That night, after Ivy slept, Catherine approached Jack. "You've given her more than protection. You've given her hope." Jack shook his head. "She gave it to me first." Catherine touched his arm lightly. "Then maybe we all saved each other." The years of loneliness Catherine had built her empire upon seemed smaller now. She still commanded boardrooms, still signed deals, but home no longer felt hollow. Ivy thrived, laughter echoing through halls once filled only with silence. And Jack, though still rough around the edges, stood like a pillar she hadn't known she needed. Catherine sometimes caught herself thinking of the night he first called, his voice hoarse, telling her not to hang up. She had almost dismissed him, almost lost everything. Fate had strange messengers. One evening, Catherine, Ivy, and Jack returned to the park where it had begun. The fountain sparkled, the memory of chaos softened by time. Ivy ran ahead, sunlight catching her pendant. Catherine stood beside Jack, their shoulders nearly touching. "Funny," she murmured. "I used to think I had everything." Jack glanced at her. "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I know I almost lost what mattered most." Jack looked away, uncomfortable but quietly proud. Together they watched Ivy laugh in the golden light. For the first time, Catherine felt whole. The war was over. The family was found.